Welcome to another episode of Ecoville. I'm your host, Nonsigelelo Kwaka. Today on the show, we are focusing on COP26, which is the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference of the Parties, which will be held in Glasgow from the 31st of October to the 12th of November. The COP26 summit will bring parties together to accelerate action towards the goals of the Paris Agreement and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This conference comes after the August release of the United Nations' latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC report, which has shown that human-induced climate change is already affecting many weather and climate extremes in every region across the globe. Scientists are also observing changes across the whole of Earth's climate system, in the atmosphere, in the oceans, ice flows, and on land. On today's show, our guest is Climate Action Network Zimbabwe coordinator, Wellington Madumira. The organization recently spearheaded a meeting with other civil society organizations to review Zimbabwe's country position paper for the COP26 conference. To give us more detail, we'd like to welcome Mr. Madumira.
Okay, thank you, Nonsigelelo. I am a coordinator of Climate Action Network in Zimbabwe, which is a chapter which is affiliated to Climate Action International and also affiliated to Climate Action Network Africa and also Southern Africa Climate Action Network. The objective of developing CAN Zimbabwe, which is Climate Action Network Zimbabwe, is to strengthen the ability of organizations concerned with climate change in Zimbabwe to address this issue effectively, so that at least we have a coordinated voice towards addressing climate change issues and also advocating for issues to do with climate change in Zimbabwe. Currently, we have got a membership of more than 110 civil society organizations, which are members of CAN Zimbabwe. So we managed to get together to address issues to do with what are our concerns towards the COP26.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Madumira, for answering our first question, which is, what is the mandate of your organization? Now we go to the next question, is what is COP26? Because we always hear people talk about it. Maybe we've heard it just as something spoken about with no real understanding. So please tell us, what is COP26 and why is it such an important conference?
Okay, thank you so much. I think you managed to answer that question when you were introducing this. COP26 is just an abbreviation for Conference of Parties, which is the 26th year of negotiating. So it's the 2021 United Nations Conference, Climate Change Conference, also known as COP26, is the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference. It will be held in Glasgow, which is Scotland, between the 31st and 12th November, the 31st of October and the 12th November, under the president of the UK government. The UN Climate Change Conference has happened every year since 1995. So this is the 26th year. Usually it's a 2-week summit where key space for stakeholders to discuss the climate crisis on a global level is done. The annual conference brings together signatory parties of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is usually referred to as UNFCCC, an international environmental treaty to address climate change, and it will be the most important climate negotiation since the Paris Agreement in 2015, whereby parties agreed to reduce their emission. So this year it's more like a stock take to see what to submit the revised nationally determined contribution. So the arrival of COP26 to Glasgow provide us with an opportunity to amplify the voices of people and communities who are on the front line of the climate crisis in different countries. These voices need to be heard to raise the awareness in Scotland that climate change is the largest impact on those that have done least to cause it. Meaning say the most vulnerable and marginalized communities are the hardest hit by climate change impact. We also believe that we all have a unique role to play in addressing climate change before, during, and after COP26 to help share stories, highlight the challenges faced, and celebrate new and existing responses to rapidly changing climates in order to build support for urgent climate action as part of a broader commitment to the UN SDGs.
Thank you for that broad explanation. So can you please tell us about the Zimbabwe country position paper for COP26? What is it and what does it entail?
The country position, maybe to summarize it, I managed to split it into different thematic areas. The first item is on finance, where we are saying, as the developing countries, we need more financial resources allocated towards climate change adaptation and mitigation. We are advocating for the developed countries to meet their commitments. Like in the developed countries, they committed to fund almost 100 billion per year, starting from 2020 up to 2024. But currently, it seems as if the developed world, they are yet to meet those commitments. And also, we are also advocating for a change in the allocation of those resources. We are saying, let's have more to do with adaptation than mitigation, because the current scenario is that 75% of finances, they are going towards mitigation, and 25% they are going towards adaptation. But as we go towards COP26, we are advocating for more resources towards adaptation, because as the developing countries, our main priority is adaptation than mitigation. Then also funding has to be predictable, accessible to vulnerable communities, and also communities having capacity to decide how to use the funds. So going there, that's our position under finance. And also finance should also be accessed by grassroots organizations, which really work directly with the communities that are hardest hit by climate change, not just limited to big institutions. Then, so we are calling upon the developed countries to come forward with a clear delivery plan for the promised 500 billion of balanced climate finance for adaptation and mitigation for developing countries for the 5-year period from 2020 to 2025, prior to setting new climate finance. So we are also looking forward to have new climate finance, especially to support developing countries. Then there's also need to improve transparency on how much is being provided and reaching developing countries, as well as better predictability, accessibility, and adequate provision of finance is also vital if we are going to address climate change issues in the developing countries. Then we also have an issue on loss and damage, where we are saying developing countries, we are the most hardest hit by climate change. So issues to do with climate justice needs also to be addressed and should be discussed in each and every COP as we go forward. Then adaptation fund should also be supported to make sure that also developing countries, they also adapt to issues to do with climate change as compared to supporting mitigation. Why? Because considering, for example, Zimbabwe, the amount of greenhouse gas that we emit is very little. So that's why we are prioritizing adaptation than also mitigation. Then also COP26 must deliver on a political commitment and a plan for finance for loss and damage, which could include climate damage tax or carbon measures, wealth tax, shifting fossil fuel subsidies as a minimum, cancelling debt during climate-induced crisis. Then on agriculture, developing countries, economies of developing countries is backed by agriculture. So we hope also that during COP26, there will be more discussion on finance towards agriculture as a way of adaptation to support even climate smart agriculture in developing countries, so that at least we have our food security, which is really conducive for residents in the developing countries. Then we also, in particular, attention should also be paid to the adaptation elements within the Coronovia Joint Program on Agriculture, as the majority of developing countries parties depend on agriculture for their income in the poverty alleviation programs. But we hope that agriculture should be supported through maybe provision of water, like irrigation systems, and also energy should also be available within the agriculture sector. Then on energy, there's need to provide grants or funds or incentive to make renewable energy products affordable to vulnerable communities. Citizens should be encouraged to pledge into the clean energy space, taking up innovations in getting the country to adopt clean and affordable energy for all. There should be a visible platform to promote local initiative projects on smart, eco-friendly solution for a just transition. Then going forward, maybe for just transition, I think which is going to be one of the topical issues. We are saying as developing countries, developed countries, they need to be flexible with the developing countries, because we need time for us to do transition from our use of coal going to 100% renewable. We also need to take time, but our transition should be supported with the finances from the developed countries, since most of our NDCs that were supported, they are conditional. Maybe from there I can go to ambition, where we are saying from all the revised NDCs that were submitted, we are yet to reach our target of 1.5 degree global trajectory. So going to COP26, we are saying there's need to narrowing the emission gap with the new and enhanced 2030 climate targets. But for developing countries, our NDC, which is the national determined contribution, is hinged on conditions that we are going to get support like from the developed countries. So what it means is like for us to achieve all those targets on reducing the emission, we need support from the developed world. So to deliver on these stretching targets, there's need to accelerate the phase out of coal, encourage investment in renewable energy, reduce deforestation, and speed up the switch to electric vehicles. So even the developing countries, we are saying for us to switch to electric vehicles, we need finance. Then we also need technical support to our nationally determined contribution, because currently for Zimbabwe, our NDCs, we are saying our revised NDCs, our target is to reduce emission by 40% emission reduction by 2030, of which we are too ambitious, provided that we are yet to receive funds to implement that NDC. Then we also have to, we are also advocating for technology transfer from the global north to the global south, to make sure that we also have to get some technologies which has to do with the reducing emission, to make sure that even our industries and also our agriculture sector, all the sectors that emit greenhouse gases, they reduce their emission using current technologies. Then I think that's all for now. That's in summary, that's what our submission is really talking about.
So just for clarity, for maybe people who don't have the kind of background and information that you have, so what you just presented to us is the recommendations, or you have given us the Zimbabwe country position paper. This is the paper that they were taking to COP26, or is the recommendations from civil society?
Yeah, as civil society, we gathered to deliberate on the government's submission to COP. Then we came up with a number of recommendations. I think there are 9 of them.
Okay,
which I can also
look, yeah, okay. Just for clarity, first I wanted to just put a clear line that okay, what you have just spoken about and what you have outlined is what was submitted by the country for COP26. So now we would want to hear from you after you gathered as civil society. What were your recommendations?
Yeah, the first one was the calling for COP26 to push for a balance on the financing gaps between mitigation and adaptation. Like I said, that climate finance was skewed towards mitigation, of which as a developing countries, our priority is adaptation. So we are saying we need to push that agenda. Then we also call upon the COP26 to consider the establishment of a direct financial intervention by international financial institutions such as AFDB in developing localized and continental finance institutions to address the imbalance between adaptation and mitigation. We strongly support the availability of climate finance. However, we also call upon COP26 to prioritize grant financing, particularly to developing countries on issues of adaptation. We are now saying we need more grants than loans, because loans, they will create more like perpetual debts to the next generation. So we are saying COP26 should also address issues to do with the grants and loans. Then we call upon COP26 to avail more financial resources to developing countries for the development of technology that allow for fair and just transition from emission-intensive technology and the process, considering also issues to do with coal, where we are saying, as developing countries, if we are just going to just switch off coal, we are going to be in dark for the next 20 years or so. Because currently our energy supply is mainly based on coal. Then we support the COP26 in the global stock take on financial gaps on mitigation and adaptation. We call upon the COP26 to push for the establishment of a continental carbon emission verification bodies like those of the Clean Development Mechanism. I think those are the submissions that we have made.
Okay, there's one recurring theme in your recommendations, and it's all focused on finance. So one of the recommendations is that COP26 should avail more financial resources to developing countries for the development of technologies that allow for the fair and just transition from emission-intensive technologies and processes such as coal and beef production. So my question really focuses on finance. Why is availing financial assistance to developing countries crucial?
From the analysis that we have done, we've realized that all the NDCs that were submitted by developing countries, they are hinged on the condition that we are going to get some finance to implement what is on the ground. So for us to be able to phase out coal, to go renewable energy, we need finance to support the manufacturing of those renewable energy products. We need support to finance us having more like even some solar farms to make sure that we go 100% renewable. We need finance to move away from like in the agriculture sector to make sure that we practice climate smart agriculture. So for us to be able to implement all those policy documents that we have, we need finance from the developed countries. The reason why we are saying developed countries should finance us is because we are saying for the developed countries to be where they are today, they have been emitting, and currently they are the real culprit of greenhouse gas emission. Because currently for Zimbabwe, our emission is very low. That's why I was saying we prioritize adaptation than mitigation. So if our emission is very low and the developed countries manage to get where they are through emission, we are now saying you have to compensate us, make sure that you also give us money so that we adopt some technologies that are currently some modern technology to address issues to do with climate change.
So we've heard your recommendations. So has government accepted your recommendations, and will they be included in the country's position paper?
Yeah, they've been included in the country's position paper. But when you are negotiating, you don't negotiate as Zimbabwe. So that position paper we also fit into the Africa position of the Africa group of negotiators. That's where now we have more like a position for Africa. So we are here to also monitor if all our concerns were also captured in the Africa group of negotiators, make sure that that information has to be presented during COP26. But currently within the government, all the recommendations that were submitted by CSOs, they were well captured in the government's position.
Okay, that's very good to hear that your voice has actually been heard. So what does it mean for African countries to attend such events, and do they amplify the African voice in the fight against climate change?
Yeah, I think we have been trying our level best. Yes, they do, even though they are yet to be met, like our African voice has to be met somewhere, somehow. But maybe we have got a number of challenges that we face, especially when we are going to COP. African delegation is very small as compared to like delegation from the developing countries is usually smaller than delegation from the developed world. due to most probably financial constraints. So there are other meetings whereby Africa is not well represented. Even CSOs, they are not well represented because of our number during COP. So going to this COP, I think our issues has to be addressed, because I think in Zimbabwe there are quite a number of people that are going. So if other developing countries manage to also to secure the places for more members, I think COP26 is going to give us better results going forward. But in the past, it seems as if it was more like finances, there will be some commitments, but no one is going to do some follow-up and the like. No one is going to deliver on those commitments. But maybe for COP26, we hope for better.
So yeah, this is the 26th summit. So do you think all the discussion on policy formulation has positively contributed to the fight against climate change?
Yeah, I think we are doing a good strides towards addressing issues to do with climate change. Because for me, whatever problem that you face, the first thing that you need to do is development of policies. So I'm proud of Zimbabwe. The current situation is like the role and responsibility of the ministry is like to develop the conducive environment for addressing a certain problem. So currently, in terms of policy formulation, I think our government managed to develop a number of policy documents that are in place: the strategy, the NDC, the climate policy, and also renewable energy, national renewable energy policy. So the policy environment is there. But maybe going forward, we need to do more to do with the implementation. So that's why now we are saying we need more financial resources to implement those policies, to implement those policy frameworks that are already there.
Okay.
So the policy environment is okay, but implementation is what is lacking currently.
Okay,
because
so
in the policy documents there are targets that are already there. So we'll be working with those targets going forward.
Okay, so it's more of implementation than policy formulation.
Yeah, we need now implementation than just policy formulation.
Okay, you spoke about government, participation and all this policy formulation that has come from government. So I just wanted you to just give us an overview of do you think the government of Zimbabwe is succeeding in putting forward policy that is helping in the fight against climate change?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say they've succeeded because we are still facing some climate change impacts. But I think in terms of developing the policy, the policy environment is okay. But we are yet to disseminate all that information to other vulnerable communities. Because currently some of the policy documents, they are just in English. So there is need to translate all those policy documents to other vernacular language so that everyone has to know about climate change. Because currently it's something that is really affecting everyone. So we need also to reach almost everyone in terms of them understanding issues to do with climate change. But due to financial constraints, sometimes it's hard for us, even all the stakeholders, to reach each and everyone within Zimbabwe to understand about climate change. So there's need to do more like even a multi-stakeholder approach whereby each and every stakeholder has a role to play in addressing climate change issues. Let's not like reserve that work to government to say government should do this, government should do this. But each and every stakeholder has a role to play in addressing issues to do with climate change, in disseminating information related to climate change to each and everyone, to make sure that our communities are also have access to information related to climate change. So in terms of policy, they've developed the policy, but they are still more like centralized. The policy is still like based in Harare and what. But we need to reach everyone. We need to reach Bangure. We need to reach Buyera, that they get to know about climate change. Then there's also need to synchronize scientific knowledge on climate change and also indigenous knowledge system to make sure that indigenous knowledge is also synchronized within the scientific system of climate change.
So lastly, overall, what are the most important issues that you hope will be addressed at the conference, especially in relation to African countries?
The first one, I think, is the issue of climate finance. like I said, for us to be able to implement even our targets within the NDC document, we need to have finance. For us to be able to implement what is in our policy document, we need finance. So I think climate finance has to be addressed, and also to support more to do with adaptation than mitigation, considering that the developing countries who are hardest hit by climate change prioritize adaptation than mitigation, even though the developed countries really prioritize mitigation than adaptation. So we end up more like everyone has got their own way of doing things. Then there's another issue on loss and damage. I think it has to be one of the topical issues to be discussed during COP26, considering what has happened during Cyclone Idai in Zimbabwe, in Chimanimani. I think that issue is also to be addressed, to make sure that there is finance towards loss and damage, to make sure that whatever disaster that we face due to climate change is to have some monetary financial gain to the country, to make sure that we address the challenges of loss and damage that we have to face going forward. I think those are the two priorities that I think has to be addressed going forward. The agriculture and also the issues to do with renewable energy, I think has been discussed for a while, and I hope that there will be finance towards renewable energy, considering that, for example, in Zimbabwe, our current scenario is that energy sector is the one that is emitting more greenhouse gases than any other sector, followed by agriculture. So there's also need to address issues to do with agriculture to make sure that we also reduce our emission.
Well, thank you, Mr. Madumira, for joining us on the program.
Okay, thank you, Nonsi Kelelo.
Yes, and thank you so much for helping us to have a better understanding on COP26, as well as Zimbabwe's position on climate change issues. Thank you again to all our listeners. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and follow us on our social media pages. Our handle is EcoVilleZW on all platforms. Join us next week for one other episode. I'm your host, Nosigelelo Kwaka.